Something was wrong. Princess and could feel it. She couldn't explain it, not yet, but something surrounding the next royal appearance just didn't sit right. And the target was young Princess Charlotte. It was supposed to be simple, a public family moment. Charlotte would have a brief appearance, say a few words, nothing big, just a soft introduction into the royal spotlight. But behind the scenes, a quiet plan had already taken shape. And if it had succeeded, the outcome could have changed Charlotte's entire future. And noticed it in the small things first. The speech cards looked different. The seating chart placed Charlotte a little farther away from her parents. And the lighting. Why were the stage lights adjusted to cast sharp shadows right where Charlotte would stand? It wasn't just strange. It was calculated, and had been around long enough to recognize it. She'd seen it used before, subtle sabotage. Not enough to cause a scandal, but just enough to create a moment. A fumble. A pause. A glare of confusion under hot lights. The kind of moment that headlines twist into weakness. And that whisper she overheard between staffers. Let's make it interesting this time. It stuck in her mind like a splinter. And didn't panic. She didn't confront anyone yet. She went back to her room, picked up her pen, and opened her diary. The place where she'd recorded quiet royal storms for decades. And this one was just beginning. She started comparing details. The original schedule, the speech drafts, the lighting design, the cues. And the deeper she looked, the more it became clear someone was setting up Princess Charlotte to fail. It wasn't overt. That would be too obvious. It was quiet, professional, surgical, a pattern she'd seen years earlier, when the same tricks were used against Catherine during a major charity gala. It had stopped that one too. And now it was happening again. Only this time, the target wasn't a duchess. It was a child. The edits to Charlotte's speech were subtle but cruel. Words removed, lines shuffled, just enough to trip her up in front of the cameras. Her entrance was rescheduled so she'd walk alone, just ahead of the rest. And the staffers responsible? Quietly tied to Queen Camilla's circle. It was the kind of tactic Anne had seen before. Not just inside the palace, but throughout royal history. Control through perception. Manipulation through appearances. One stumble, and the media would feast. The footage would spread, and Charlotte's young image would be reshaped by a moment she never even saw coming. And wouldn't let that happen. The night before the event, and made her move. She didn't bring guards. She didn't call a meeting. She walked alone to the office of one of the aides linked to the altered plans. No shouting, no threat. She placed the manipulated cue cards on the desk. And then, with steady eyes, she asked, "Are you sure this is how you want to be remembered?" The aide stammered, denied, deflected, but and didn't need a confession. She had everything she needed. She took back the original documents, corrected every note, reassigned the aide and one assistant quietly, with no explanation. By morning, everything was reset. The lighting was restored. Charlotte's speech was untouched, and no one, not even William or Catherine, knew what had almost happened. The event went off perfectly. Charlotte stepped forward, calm and steady. She spoke with grace, clarity, and a natural poise far beyond her years. The crowd applauded. The cameras flashed, and behind the curtain, and stood in silence. Not for recognition, not for thanks, but to be sure. Charlotte had made it through. Later that night, and returned to her diary. She spoke with strength, she wrote, and the silence of what nearly happened. That belongs to me. But one question lingered. Should she have told William? From the outside, it seems obvious. He's her father. He deserved to know, but knew better. William isn't just a dad. He's the future king. And if he had found out, he would have acted. He would have demanded answers. Gone to Charles. Maybe even gone public. And that anew would have turned one quiet moment into a royal crisis. The press would circle. The family would fracture. And worst of all, Charlotte would know. And didn't want her niece to carry that shadow. To wonder if her perfect moment had only happened because someone saved her. She wanted her to believe she'd earned it. because she had. Someone stayed silent. After the event, she watched as William hugged Charlotte tightly. "You were perfect," he whispered, and stood nearby, unnoticed, smiling softly. She didn't interrupt. That moment belonged to them. And even if William never knew what she did, she hoped he would one day understand why. In the days after, and made quiet changes. The aides involved were reassigned, one to a distant post abroad, another to a department far from the royal court. No statements, no press, just action. Because Anne doesn't believe in revenge. She believes in protection. She wrote in her diary, "The goal isn't to punish. The goal is to prevent the next time." And this wasn't the first time she'd done it. Years ago, she shielded Catherine from a nearly identical attempt at public humiliation. Back then, too, she acted alone, fixed it quietly, wrote about it in her journal, and moved on. Now, decades later, she did the same for Charlotte. Anne's power doesn't come from a throne or title. It comes from stillness, from watching, from knowing when to act and when to hold back. She doesn't seek attention. She doesn't need applause, because what she's building is bigger than any headline. She's preserving something the world rarely sees anymore: integrity inside the crown. And there's one more reason she never said anything to William, one she never wrote in her diary. She was afraid. Afraid that if William found out, he would never again look at his daughter the same way. Not with disappointment, but with worry, with doubt. That quiet change could leave a lasting imprint. The look of a father who knows his child was almost broken by forces she doesn't understand, and didn't want Charlotte to carry that weight. She believed the best way to protect her was to let her believe she never needed protecting. So she said nothing. She stayed in the shadows, and she let the moment pass like it had never happened. But it had, and she would remember it forever. Anne's legacy isn't built on power. It's built on precision, quiet decisions, silent victories. And now, Charlotte will grow up never knowing how close she came to being publicly shaken before she was ready. But Anne will know. And for her, that's enough. So here's what we're left with: one silent protector, one child on the edge of sabotage, and a royal moment that could have gone terribly wrong, if not for one woman who refused to let history repeat itself, and didn't stop the plan to be remembered. She stopped it because she knew what was at stake. Sometimes the most powerful act is the one no one sees. But now you've seen it, and that changes everything. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the royals, about power, silence, or sacrifice, then don't let it fade. Click like to let the story live on. Subscribe now so you never miss the voices behind the throne. Writing hand and tell us in the comments, do you think this kind of protection happens more often than we realize? Or was this a one-time act of royal bravery? Your voice matters. And here, it will be heard, even if theirs wasn't. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next story, where silence speaks louder than crowns.